Wolves are steeped in legends throughout history.
Vision 20 times sharper than a human's. The wolves of Yellowstone can spot creatures with the greatest ease.
The dark wolf picks up a promising trail. Droplets of blood from an injured elk.
Wolves have not called this valley home for more than 80 years. Until now.
You're going to turn to a new warning for tourists. That's ahead of summer vacation. Yellowstone National Park has issued a new alert after several incidents that put both wildlife and people in danger.
Most Yellowstone wolves have been killed in a single season since they were reintroduced to the park more than 25 years ago. Since September 17th, park rangers say hunters have killed 20 between Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming.
In and around Yellowstone National Park, gray wolves are a tourist attraction. There's another one. Rare stars in nature's pageantry.
Wolves were well established in Yellowstone when the park was designated in 1872. They are arguably one of the most controversial forms of wildlife on the planet.
50,000 choice morsels of meat cut into convenient size for gobbling up by hungry sheep killer. Each tiny morsel with its portion of poison tucked safely away inside, tasteless and effective. This is the quality for Nevada alone. 75,000 mouthfuls of meat and poison from New Mexico. Thus is the table of the Western pasture, prepared for the slinking bandit who prowls and preys wherever he may, sulking by day and slaying by night, the finest and choosiest of farmers' lambs and sheep and calves. This quote comes from a press release in 1921 by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The piece describes wolves and coyotes as vicious bandits responsible for livestock losses and the need for them to be eradicated. In the following years, wolves native to the Yellowstone area would essentially be eradicated. The story of wolves, Yellowstone, tourism, and farmers is a complex narrative with many layers that needs to be peeled back in order to understand the complicated relationships. To start unraveling this tale, we must first look at Yellowstone National Park. Existing primarily in Wyoming, but also in parts of Idaho and Montana, the park is roughly 2.2 million acres. Established in 1872, the park's mission is to, quote, to share the wonders and preserve and protect the scenery, cultural heritage, wildlife, geologic and ecological systems and processes in their natural condition for the benefit and enjoyment of present and future generations, end quote. Today, the park has a diverse amount of flora and fauna, with notable mammals such as bighorn sheep, bison, elk, moose, mountain goats, mule deer, pronghorn, white-tailed deer, black bears, Canada lynx, grizzly bears, mountain lions, wolverines, and wolves all call the park home. These animals, though, are not alone in that bobcats, coyotes, weasels, red foxes, otters, beavers, and even 13 species of bats, and many more animals make this park the largest concentration of mammals in the continental United States. This large collection of animals makes Yellowstone a tourist must-go for many nature lovers and animal enthusiasts. However, while wolves have become a staple of the park's tourism efforts, the wolves at Yellowstone have had a tumultuous history of extermination by the federal government and local farmers that only recently shifted during the 1970s as efforts began to reintroduce them back into the environment. Wolves are not new to North America. Remains of gray wolves have been found in the region as far back as 15,000 years ago. As one of the apex predators, though, this existence was a threat to the fur trappers and farmers who would begin to move into the area in the 1800s. The wolves would potentially sneak into fur trapper camps to kill livestock or at worst spread diseases like rabies. Attacks by wolves upon men were rare, but as competition between man and wolf drove down the population of beavers in the 1860s, hunters shifted their focus to bison. Bison were preyed on by wolf packs, so hunters poisoned wolves by leaving tainted bison carcasses out for the wolves to eat. As an anthropologist and historian, George Bird Grinnell, said in 1897, in those days, wolves had no fear of man. They were seldom shot at and knew of the gun, chiefly as an implement to call them to the feast. In addition to hunters, Americans pushing westward in search of land were beginning to enter the soon-to-be states. They viewed wolves as a symbol of the potential dangers that lingered in the darkness, waiting should they fail, and a threat to their families as they attempted to establish a new home. Yellowstone had been discovered in the 1870s and would become a spot for all types of Americans, both to wonder at the beauty, but also to try and turn a profit. One such way was to sell wolf pelts for $4 to $6 or to join in the government-issued bounties set for killing wolves. As Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho were ratified, these bounties on wolves would not disappear due to the damage wolves caused for the ranchers. While legislation had made it illegal to kill wolves on the Yellowstone National Park due to the Lacey Act that began conservation efforts towards animals, wolves that wandered too far onto ranchers' properties could find themselves with a bullet lodged in their bodies. Wolves would continue to have a negative image in part due to unfair blame being placed on them for elk and other prey animals, migration patterns shifting closer towards human settlements. Then, in the beginning of the 20th century, the United States federal government would begin to actively hunt or poison wolves all over the Rocky Mountain area, including the Yellowstone National Park.
Look at that flesh.
In 1915, the United States government allocated no less than $125,000 shall be used on the national forests and public domains in destroying wolves, coyotes, and other animals injurious to agriculture and animal husbandry. With the government supports, the wolf population dropped. Although wolves were never completely eradicated from the parks, their presence was greatly diminished. By the 1920s, exterminating wolves within the park was no longer a priority, but wolves continued to be killed. The states that comprised Yellowstone would continue to offer bounties. However, due to the low numbers of wolves, because of the effectiveness of these programs, rewards were lowered, and soon it no longer became a lucrative industry to hunt down wolves. Wolves would be continued to be spotted from the 1930s to 1970s in the parks, but these would often be few and far in between. However, hope remained that the wolves might still be making a home in the region. Since the 1960s, a shift began among Americans of wanting to take care of the environment. These sentiments of wanting to help preserve the environment can be seen with the signing of the Endangered Species Act into law. The law pledged the United States would strive to encourage the states and other interested parties through federal financial assistance and programs which meet national and international standards. Sightings of wolves were still rare throughout the 1970s, and scientists began to call for the reintroduction of wolves. John Weaver, in 1975, was tasked to study potential wolf activity in the park, and by the end of his research, he concluded 2 options are available for wolf management in Yellowstone Park. 1, do nothing, or 2, attempt to restore a viable wolf population by introduction. The former alternative has been employed since 1927. Over the last 50 years, a viable population has not reestablished. When the federal government listed wolves to the endangered species list, this would help the push to bring the wolves back to Yellowstone, as a team of biologists known as the Northern Rocky Mountain Wolf Recovery Plan, or WRP, was formed for the purpose of creating a roadmap to wolf recovery. In 1987, the federal government approved the revisions that called for the reintroduction of experimental populations of wolves into Yellowstone and central Idaho. Throughout the 1980s and into the 1990s, the efforts to bring wolves back would be seen in both Congress and even with a protest occurring in 1989 at Yellowstone calling for wolves to be brought back. It was decided to bring wolves back, and on March 21st, 1995, these reintroduced wolves would officially enter the park. While scientists seem to be enthusiastically on the side of reintroducing wolves back into the park to attempt to balance out the environment, public opinion was also partially on the side of wolves, but many still did not understand what introducing Yellowstone wolves into the park would entail. Many articles began to appear in newspapers, such as this one found in the New York Times from January 1995 that was meant to inform the public on both the history and impact reintroduction of the wolves would have as part of a build-up to the official release. However, not everyone was happy, as recorded in the January 26, 1995 transcripts of the Committee of Resources House of Representatives oversight hearings on introducing gray wolves in Yellowstone and Idaho. Barbara Cuban, a representative from Wyoming, commented on the lack of the Secretary of Interior's correspondence to the governor of the state with the plan moving forward to bring the wolves back. She even stated, "I also want to know how the Secretary intends to compensate those ranchers whose livestock and livelihoods are threatened when wolves start killing their livestock. I want to know the total cost of the program from the beginning of the public hearing process to the introduction date. It is an enormous amount of money to be spending on an animal that is in no danger of being wiped off the face of the earth." Others, such as Helen Knoswith of Idaho, said the program violated citizens' rights, arguing, "You have written into your testimony that the wolf is a predator, Mr. Secretary. Idaho law allows for the killing of predators without a permit. Do we simply have an oxymoron, or do we have a challenge to the 10th Amendment of the United States Constitution? I strongly believe not only have your wolves trespassed on the lands of the state of Idaho, your agencies have trespassed onto the Constitution of the United States of America, the supreme law of the land." Additionally, protests at the parks would occur against the reintroduction. Bumper stickers could be found on cars that showed support for wolves not being reintroduced back into the parks. And at the protests that occurred, many of the signs depicted that locals did not wish to see these wolves brought back to the park. Even with these objections, the program was allowed to go through. It has been almost 30 years since the public return of wolves, and since then, they have become a pillar of Yellowstone's tourism. With this return of a species, the public's interest and curiosity has grown. One area both scientists and citizens initially raised concerns over were the snowmobiles that had been in the park since the 1960s, regarding how their noise and pollution might impact both wolves and bison's health. Snowmobiles were seen as a necessity in the parks during the winter when snow covered the landscape. The public's response to seeing the wolves has also been observed, with researchers finding the reintroduction of wolves in 1995 generated nearly $5 million in income to the local economy in 1995 alone. In a study done that looked at the impact of Instagram on those planning or thinking of going to the parks, they found that people who self-identified as having conservative views were significantly influenced by wildlife photos, similar to participants' attitudes who identified as having a moderate and liberal ideology. What this means is people have shifted greatly their opinion on hunting of wolves and actively want to visit the parks to see such species. A quick look at Yellowstone's Instagram page will reveal posts that feature wolves have a significant number of likes compared to other posts. But there are those who still dislike wolves, and the killing of wolves that wander too far onto ranchers' property continues to this day, while public sentiments over the wolf have become much more on the positive side. The area is still a hotbed of discontent. One thing though is Yellowstone stands firmly in defense of their wolves while they are on park property, and a spectacle for visitors who wish to get a glimpse at these majestic creatures.